Why did I initially want to adopt? Well, I've always wanted to have a large family, and I had my 3 girls from my first marriage. And when I married Ray, he was not able to have children, and so we decided that we would adopt. And so we made our first attempt and had a little boy and a little girl, and their mother changed her mind and took them back. We called them our summer babies, and prayed for a miracle basically, because we already had children. It was very difficult to find someone that was willing to give up a child to people who already had kids. And our neighbor Jill, who lived next door, came to us on Christmas Day and said, "Do you still want a baby?" And we said yes. And she said, "Merry Christmas, I have a little boy for you." Her mother was a social worker too, Taylor's birth mother, Alice. And so we packed up the car and went to Salt Lake early the next morning and saw our little Christmas angel.
Okay, so that was in December of '86, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He was a week old.
Okay. Had he had his heart surgeries by then?
No.
What kind of complications did he have after he was born?
Well, he was born, I think he weighed just a little over 2 pounds. It was like 2 pounds, 14 ounces. And he would gain weight and get up to about 4 pounds, which was the magic number in order to bring him home. When he was born, back in those days, they didn't have they didn't give surfactant like they do now, and so most babies who were premature suffered from what we call BPD, which is bronchial pulmonary dysplasia, and Taylor was no exception to that. At that time that he was born, they were just starting studies on surfactant, and he evidently wasn't one that got it. And so he did develop BPD, and that's the after effects of that is he's now got asthma as an adult. So with that said, what they would do is they would put him on ventilators, and because the oxygen flow was so high, sometimes it would create brain bleeds. And he did have I think it was a grade 2 brain bleed at the time. And so they were trying to get him off of the oxygen, but he wouldn't quite wean off. We would just get him off, and he would lose weight or some other complication would happen. So what happened, to make a long story short, is we finally got him weaned off the oxygen. He got up to 4 pounds. We were excited to finally get to take him home, and then he started to lose weight, started to have problems. And what they found is the patent ductus, which is the duct between the 2 ventricles of the heart, wasn't closing off like it normally does at birth. It's open during the time babies are inside of their mothers, but then it closes off at birth, and his just wasn't closing off. And so they went in and did a surgery, and it's just basically a ligation, which means they just go in and put a little stitch there. But they make a little tiny incision, but because he was a little baby, the incision grew with him. So it looks really big today compared to what it really was. And so they go in and they just make a little incision and go in and tie off that ductus arteriosus so that the oxygen isn't flowing between the 2 ventricles. And after that, he gained weight really very quickly, within weeks of that surgery.
And what were some of the medical amenities you had to do for him when you actually brought him home?
He was on oxygen for the first almost 3 years of his life. When we brought him home was really interesting because we went from higher elevation down to a lower elevation. And the oxygen tanks that they gave us did okay, but by the time we hit Cedar City, the tank had emptied. So we brought him home on a Sunday, and we were running around Cedar City trying to find a place that was open that would give us oxygen, and we couldn't find any place. So finally, I think we went to the hospital, and they finally found someone for us that would give us a tank to get us home. He used a lot less oxygen in the lower elevations of St. George, but it was just that 6,000 elevation drop down and the climb from Salt Lake to Cedar that used up the oxygen. So he was on, and he was only on like 1/4 of a liter, and basically needed it more when he slept than when he was awake. But we used to laugh because we had a 50-foot cord around the house, so he could go to every room with his oxygen. So he was kind of tethered. And in fact, when I would take him for walks, I'd have his little oxygen tank, and it was like a little leash. And he'd walk along with his little leash. So oxygen was one of the complications. The other one was he had to come home on an apnea monitor, just because that was just a precaution that they took with any premature babies. So
And how did the family adjust when you brought Taylor home?
Oh, they were so excited. He had 4 mothers because all the girls just, took it upon themselves to be his little mom. He was the most bathed, dressed, redressed, bathed, redressed child because they had to try on every little outfit on him. They all fought over who got to take care of him. And he loved them and they loved him. It was a very easy adjustment for the girls. There were 10 years between him and my youngest, so they just all were in that little mommy stage, wanting to be mommies.
And what was it like to bring home a baby boy? I know you guys said you wanted a boy.
We wanted anything. We would have taken anything. You know what? It was exciting because the boy was more to give Ray a balance. He was surrounded by estrogen and females that gave him a little testosterone in the house. And he'd always wanted a son. He had had a son from a previous marriage that he had adopted that he had to take back because of circumstances in those days. You had to have both parents sign, and his wife decided to leave, and in so doing he had to take the child back, and that always left a sore spot in his heart, and he wanted his son, and he got him.
And what kind of communication did you keep with Alice?
Because we opted for an open adoption, which was new at the time, it wasn't wildly popular, we made the choice to keep in contact with her. And the first couple of times that we had contact with her family, it was mainly with her mother and father. She wasn't quite ready at that time. And it wasn't until he was about 3 years old that she finally, maybe he was even younger than that, but anyway, he was already a toddler the first time she got to actually see him. But his grandparents saw him from, I think he was about 3 or 4. Well, he was almost 4 months old when we brought him home. So I think the first time they saw him again was he was 6 months old. So every time we went to Salt Lake to visit my family, we would call and see if they wanted to see him, and 100% of the time they did. So.
And how did you end up telling Taylor initially?
I don't think we ever had to tell him. He just knew from the time he was born that that he had 2 moms, and he was okay with having 2 moms. He wasn't as okay as having 2 dads, so that was a little bit more of a problem, I think, with him as he grew older. He finally wanted to talk about it, but when he was younger, it was always a closed subject, not because we wanted it to be closed, but because he, and we didn't push him until he was ready to accept that. We had a picture of his birth father in his baby book, but he would always kind of skip over that page. He liked the idea of having 2 moms and all the grandparents and the extended family, but it wasn't until he was in his teenage years before he finally wanted to meet his birth father.
And what age did he end up finding out for sure that he had 2 mothers?
From the time we brought him home. It was never a hidden subject because he was always constantly going up there and visiting with them and seeing him. I always had the stance that his birth mother was courageous enough and loving enough to place him where she knew he would be well taken care of. And I thought that was a great act of love on her part. And I had a big enough heart that I could share him with anyone. He was a beautiful baby, why not? He belonged not just to me, but she brought him into this world, and I felt like she deserved to have part of him as well. So, and he was okay with that. It wasn't ever a big discussion. We had a few storybooks that we had when he was little on adoption, but adoption was never a bad word in our house. It was always a good word. It meant that God shared him with us, and we were excited to have it, so it was never a negative.
And what would you say to parents or people who are considering adoption?
I think that they get to do what they're comfortable with. It was something that worked for us, an open adoption. I don't think it works for everyone. I think that it depends on the comfort level of the family and the circumstances of the birth mother and the willingness of the birth mother. Alice was very good to be a part of Taylor's life without taking over his life, and knowing that she for a long time she kept saying, "What do I call myself?" And I said, "Call yourself whatever you want. You can call him, you can say you're his mother, his birth mother." For a while, she just referred to herself as Alice, and I think it's only been in the last little while that she's just referred to herself more as birth mother or mother. So it was whatever comfort level she had for her. I was okay with that. And I'll always be his mother. I'm the one that raised him, and he's my little boy. But I think that individually, it's an individual thing. I don't think that there's one set of rules that fits all. You know, I think that people do what they're comfortable with and what works for them.
Okay. And when it comes to taking on the care for a premature baby, what was it like to take care of a premature baby? Because I know that sometimes they can have complications and sometimes it can be mentally straining. But how did it feel to bring home a baby that you knew was a little bit premature?
A little bit, a lot of bit. The thing with Taylor was we were never sure. I think that they finally decided he was about 30 weeks. I heard anywhere from 30 to 32 weeks. I think it doesn't matter whether the child's adopted or not. Premature babies, there's always a lot of risk. I think medicine is better today in understanding and the treatment with less complications. But I think it's not just a premature baby, it's bringing home any child that may have complications with their health. And I think it's just, you love them. And when you do, and you allow them to do what they can do and accept what they can do as being perfect, then you're okay. At least that was in our case. You know, we were told a lot of things that could go wrong with him, and we chose that they wouldn't, and treated him as though he could do anything, and he did. He rose to the occasion. So I think a lot of it is a mindset. If you allow someone to be ill all the time or let them know all the things that can be wrong, the mind is a very powerful thing. It will then accept it, and pretty soon you have dis-ease in your body and in your life. With Taylor, we just always knew that he would be healthy and strong, and he was.